another edition of AIMS. Today we're going to go over a generic slideshow. So your basic kind of parts, components of any kind of scientific presentation that you're going to have to make. Some will be shorter, some will be longer, of course, but this will give you the basic framework from which to work from. So with any good title slide, you always want to have, of course, your affiliations nice and clear. They pay for you, you're part of their brand, you want to make sure you include that. And indeed, for the slides, it is always good form to use the university templates or your institutional templates whenever possible, because they've invested a lot of time in that, and frankly that saves you time thinking about your color schemes and whatnot. And it also, you know, shows that you're a good team player and that sort of thing. So all your affiliations should be nice and clear. Good, clean, short, crisp title, like we talked over with the abstracts. You want something people can find you with. And if you want to have a subtitle where you can talk a little more, that's perfectly fine. Always include your name, your rank, title, what date, and the event name. Now the date and the event name come in really handy, because after you start to do a lot of presentations, you know, they could all start to run together. So you want to make sure that you have everything clearly labeled so that you can go back and find something should you need to. And also too, it provides you another reference point in case you forgot to put something on your CV. You can go back to your folder full of your presentations and go, oh yeah, I forgot that I presented at the University of X on this date. So your title slide should be nice and brief. When you are actually talking and you're giving your speech, this is where you say thank you to the people for hosting you and all that sort of good stuff, but you keep it short. So your basic anatomy of a scientific talk. A lot of people still will use an outline slide where they're going to project what it is they're going to talk about. So they'll say, oh, I'm going to have an introduction, my methods, results, conclusions, limitations, and of course my future directions. These are the basic sections. Sometimes you can cut some out or combine some depending on how much time you have, but these are the basic bits that form your scientific talk. Now your introduction or your background, this is where you frame your problem, like define the disorder that you're dealing with, who does it affect, how bad is it, lead the people to your question or your hypothesis. You want to do that traditional funnel approach of known to unknown to question or hypothesis. So you just want to give people enough information that they can judge your science where you're coming from, so they know why what you're doing is important, why does it matter, and also where is your idea coming from. I always like to make the hypothesis slide or the question slide its own standalone slide with a nice big fat font. People can drift in and out of your talk, and unless you are, you know, really have one of those hyper engaging personalities, which are frankly uncommon in science, let's be honest, you know, you really need to make it as simple as possible. When trying to frame your hypothesis, of course, you can always refer back to your PICO approach, and we'll cover that in another AIMS talk, but all the residents out there and the doctors out there really know it. It's old hat to them. So for your methods, who did you study? What did you do to them? How did you measure the effect? How did you analyze that? And assume nothing. Explain every acronym, every tool very clearly. You know, you'll often be presenting to mixed audiences, meaning that not everybody's going to know what SWI is if you're an imager, or not everyone's going to know what a KSADS is if you're dealing in child psychiatry. So you really want to spell everything out and don't assume a fundamental level of knowledge. This happens especially in a lot of basic science talks. People just assume that everyone knows every single technique that you're doing. They don't. So bring them up to speed on it. Results. Less is more when it comes to text, when it comes to your results. Use graphs when at all possible. Always link back to your question, and indeed your first finding should be the answer to your main question, especially if it's a very short talk. You don't have a lot of time to mess around, so you really want to hit it very quickly and effectively. You know, so you want to then frame the question afterwards if you've got enough space. Conclusions. What did you find? Say it again. Again, you got to repeat. People's attention waxes and wanes. Indeed, there's a graph out there, a very famous graph of the attention span people have during scientific lectures and presentations. And indeed, it's an inverted U, where attention is highest at the start and at the end. So you really want to make sure you keep it nice and clear so that you can actually get your point across effectively. With your conclusions, of course, you also want to make sure, does it fit with the literature? If not, why? And if it does, are you sure you did it right? And then, of course, it's always very important to cycle it back to why should people care about your work? What's the significance of your finding? What's the implication? Is there a treatment implication, diagnostic? Does it improve our understanding of a particular facet of neurobiology? What is it? Why should people care? Limitations. Limitations are a critical slide for every talk. Why? Most of your questions are going to come from people thinking, oh, well, they didn't do that right. They didn't do this right. And if you have a nice limitation slide, it really helps. When I was in graduate school, I was presenting at a conference, and I knew this one fellow was going to be there, and he was rather notorious for dominating question periods, for just shredding people's work. And I said to my supervisor, I was very nervous about it, and she said, you know what, sit down, write out the best limitation slide you can, answer every possible thing that you could have done wrong, and there you go. You know, you can really take the wind out of their sails. And indeed, I did that, and it worked. It was an international conference. It was a big deal to me, and it went very well because of that. And the guy even came up afterwards and said, you know, I really didn't have any questions for you. And I always thought that was funny. But really, the other thing with the limitations too, it sets up your next slide perfectly, which is your future directions. Well, how do you fix all the problems with your study to do it better? You know, get people excited about the line of research and, you know, what you're bringing to the table, because people will get excited and try to collaborate with you. They may want to hire you, all those sorts of good things. You want to show some enthusiasm about this line and where it can go and just what the possibilities are. Acknowledgements. It's always important to slip in a thank you slide. For the love of Pete, spell the names correctly. That is really important. There's nothing worse. All institutions and institutes you're affiliated with, you want to highlight them as well. Basically, anyone who gave you $1 at any point in your life, you want to make sure you include them in an acknowledgement. Because then they can also claim that your presentation was part of the institutional activities and all that sort of good stuff. So it looks good for them, it looks good for you, it looks good for everybody. So, extra bits. So that's a basic talk that we've gone over. These are the other little notes and ideas that can be helpful. When practicing, timing is everything. You really want to work on coming in just a little bit under, at least, for your talk. If you're told you have 20 minutes, you want to come in 18, 19 minutes, just to be sure. Some people like the rhythm of 1 minute per slide. That gets a little robotic to me, but it really helps some people. Never, ever come in overtime. Ever. It is an incredibly ignorant move to say, well, I'm not going to get to this slide, I'm not going to get to that, I'm not going to be able to cover this. It's almost as hateful as saying, well, I know you can't read this slide, but it's just ignorant. Don't do it. You can always do better. Expect more from yourself and expect more from your peers, frankly. You can always bet on losing time. So if you come in over and all of a sudden the adapter malfunctions for the laptop, or you know, they're making announcements over the hospital loudspeaker for 3 minutes, you know, the introduction takes a little bit longer because the guy wants to tell the story about how he first met you in 7th grade. You know, these are the things that you want to be very conscious of. Always bet on losing some time. If you budget where you have a little extra time and you're talking and you come in and you still have a little elbow room, spend some more time on, you know, your discussion, your limitations and future directions and stuff. People, like I said, remember the beginning and the ending really well, so put the emphasis on the ending. Doesn't hurt. You know, what's the worst that could happen is they remember what you found and why it's important. So some basic timing rules of thumb, you can refer to this. You know, if for each section that you're going to be dealing with, you can break it up into its component parts. You know, if you've got a 15-minute talk, a 30-minute talk, or a 60-minute talk, I really hate tables in slides, so for me to put this in physically made me sad. But this is the way to kind of show it. So, you know, with a 60-minute talk, you've got a lot more elbow room. I would advise too, when looking at the structure, you've probably heard some really great speakers who are very much a storyteller and can tell a lot of jokes and go off on a lot of different tangents and really lead you to some great stuff. Unless you are very good at it and very experienced, stick to the basics to start until you get very comfortable with your presenting style. People will expect the basics, they will judge you on it, and especially if you're a graduate student, you wander too far off into left field, your supervisors and the other colleagues, you know, they're going to really start to question where you're coming from. You want to speak the language people understand, and that's this basic introduction, methods, results, conclusions, boom, format. Humor. Use at your own career risk. Humor is very, very dangerous. Cultural concerns are huge. We are a very diverse group when it comes to science, and that's a great thing. And people are coming from all sorts of different perspectives, and it's very easy to slide into something that could be offensive to somebody, and you don't want to do that. That's just mean. Cartoons, they were funny and cool in the 90s, less so now. And just because your mom laughs at your jokes does not mean that you are funny. You always want to keep things G-rated, and when in doubt, if you're going to use humor, use some self-depreciating humor over attacking others. That's the better way to do it. You know, pointing inward at a commonality, a common foible, that sort of thing, that's perfectly fine. You don't want to wander too far off, you know, take too many risks. Content. People will read instead of listening to you. So if you're using text, you really have to be dynamic to hold their attention. Don't be afraid to actually move. You know, it won't kill you. And you gesture with your hands and that sort of thing. You want to be engaging. There's nothing worse than, you know, hearing somebody just slaughter a presentation with a desperate monotone. Pictures are good. If you can weave a story out of it, but that is really, like I said, a master level approach. I heard a guy from Primate Lab a few years ago give a talk. Not one word appeared on any of his slides. It was all pictures and video, and he held the crowd spellbound for a good 90 minutes before question period, and it was amazing. But this guy was a master at this. The other thing, keep your fonts large as humanly possible. You know, you want to keep it big, and unless it's a short list, you really want to limit points. You only have so many points people can grasp per slide. Some people like to abide by the 3 points per slide rule, which actually, you know, has some good points to it, no pun intended. Don't be afraid of some white space. You know, it's not going to kill you. You're not trying to cram in everything you've ever known ever into your slide presentation. Graphs are your friend. Walk people through it. Which axis is which? What are you looking for? Schematics are awesome. They are fantastic. You can walk people through. Tables, again, are your blood enemy. Try to avoid them when at all possible. And if you have to apologize for one of your slides, remove it, change it, or you're a bad person. Simple as that. And that's a generic slideshow. So thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this session of AIMS, and I look forward to the next one. Good luck with your talks.